We want to welcome Celine Amazon. So I'm going to read a brief biography. She's got an amazing amount of credentials, is an attorney and has represented students and families for over 30 years. She was the former supervising attorney for the Legal Aid Bureau of Maryland, where she represented children in the foster care system. For nearly 23 years, she represented families in special education matters with a primary focus on the least restrictive environment issues at the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education, which is very near and dear to my heart. Since September of 2014, she's been the legal director for the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, which you guys, I'm sure, have heard of as COPA, where she supports the work of the Amicus Committee as well as works on federal and local policy issues. So we want to welcome Celine this morning to REACH. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate it.
So as you guys can tell, we certainly have someone that's going to be sharing information with us that is beyond qualified to let us know. And for you guys who aren't quite clear, it actually took me a few trips into the Maryland area to realize how impactful Maryland and people who live even in Maryland are to what happens nationally, because Washington is like there. It's like right there.
Right.
And normally, even when I go to Washington to advocate, I stay in Maryland. I mean, that's how close. It's like down the street there. So I just want you guys to realize that we have somebody that's speaking to us today who's from that area, who's right in the hub of all the big decisions that are being made today. So I wanted to be able to let families know that with so many schools being closed, I think that a lot of the message to the families are, okay, well, you know, we're out of school, so we can't really do education, so we're just gonna like upload some things for you. And parents are really confused over if they even have any rights. And a lot of families are assuming that they do not. So can you kind of explain what a parent's rights are as far as a free and appropriate public education and what that means right now?
Sure. Well, first of all, I hope everybody is staying well and staying safe wherever you are, because that's the most important thing right now. And I also understand that everybody is under a tremendous amount of stress, you know, myself included. I am not isolating at home because I am part of a, you know, I have asthma, so I am isolating somewhere else to stay away from people. So it is a very difficult time. And then I also want to say at the outset that we are in uncharted territory with this, you know, basically nationwide school closures. So what's important for families to realize, and this is a little in the weeds, but very important, I think, for families to understand, is that the position of this Department of Education, when they issued the first policy guidance on March 12, 2020, they said that schools are not providing an education for anyone in their jurisdiction. They have no obligation to provide an education to children with disabilities. This is a complete 360-degree departure from their previous policy guidance. From 2014, the Ebola guidance clearly said that students with disabilities are entitled to a free, appropriate public education, regardless of whatever may be happening to children who do not have disabilities. That is where we kind of got this idea that schools would have to hold IEP team meetings, because in that guidance from 2014, the department at the time said you had to have IEP meetings, and I'll get to that in a second. Then again in 2016, the department issued another guidance on charter schools. When charter schools go belly up and go bankrupt, go out of business, whatever, children with disabilities are still entitled to an education. You can't use the excuse that a charter school system has gone belly up to say that children with disabilities are not entitled to a free, appropriate public education. So after they released the March 12th guidance, some school districts like Philadelphia school district said, hey, we're not going to offer education to anyone, because we don't want to have to offer education to children with 504 plans and IEP meetings. So then they issued another guidance on March 21st, 2020, which was really very nice. It was my 60th birthday in quarantine, so that was like my nice birthday gift, in which the department then said, no, that's not really what we meant. It means that ideally what schools should be doing is taking what the IEP has now, pre-school closure, the day before school's closed in your area, say it's March 12th, what the IEP said at that time, and use that as the starting point for what you're going to work on when you're at home, and develop a learning distance plan based on that IEP. So the bottom line is really that schools have to be flexible, parents have to be flexible, but you still have your rights.
Right. So in the guidance from the Department of Education, schools, end quote, must make every effort to provide special education and related services to students. But it does note that there could be exceptional circumstances that change how those services might take place. What do they mean when they say these special circumstances? What's an example of a special circumstance?
It could be if you have a school district that is paying a third-party provider to go into the home, maybe to provide behavior services, and they cannot, and the student might have a pre-existing condition that prevents that from a third party coming into the home because the family doesn't want the student to be exposed to COVID. That might be an exceptional circumstance. It might be an exceptional circumstance if the special educator, him or herself, has COVID and cannot do the instruction. But an exceptional circumstance is not that schools are closed, because they still have an obligation to provide an education to children with disabilities.
So a lot of families are trying to get some type of virtual or video instruction from their teacher instead of, uploaded documents. Here's you do 3 per week, or, I mean, I've heard so many stories of so many different, it's kind of amazing because I see some teachers that are providing a lot of, they're using different platforms to actually meet with each student, with their groups of students, and then some who are literally just uploading a few worksheets a week, and that's what you get. So parents are kind of using who are trying to advocate for their children, direct instruction. What level of direct instruction? So can you kind of, because it's very hard to, like, if you are a parent and you're researching to find out a definition of direct instruction so that you can give that to your school and say, well, this is what you should be providing. It's like this thing that's hidden within, somewhere. So can you tell parents, like, I don't know, maybe there's certain verbiage that they might be able to use in order to get actual instruction from their teacher rather than uploaded documents?
Yeah. So first of all, COPA does have a web page where we have some resources on distance learning. I have been working on some FAQs that we have developed, based on questions that we're getting from our members. And so I encourage everybody to go to www.copaa.org and look at the COVID page that we have there, because we do have information in English and in Spanish for families. So the first thing the families should be doing, and I do realize that it puts the onus on families, but at this point, this is the best that we have. Families should know where your child was the day before school closed. What were their academic skills like? What level were they reading? What was their math skills? What was their baseline for speech, for OT, for PT? All of those things. And the beauty of this is that they should have already had the second quarter progress report. So you already should have that information. That information should be in the system, because that would all probably happened right before school started closing. So that's your baseline. Families should videotape on their phone the extent to which they can, any kind of skills that children have right now, and then videotape where they are when schools reopen. Your advocacy for direct instruction, this is an individualized determination. Individualized and not go out the window because we have a pandemic. If a student needs a direct instruction, then families have to document that they want direct instruction because this is how their child learns best. Even if it's just a face like this on the computer screen, that is how the child is going to remain engaged. The onus, obviously, is still on families to make sure that they sit their child in front of a computer or a laptop or an iPad to be engaged and be ready for instruction. And I realize that this is, the onus is on families to have to do this, but it is the same kind of advocacy that you use during schools and IEP meetings, saying that you need direct instruction, put it in writing, say you want a prior written notice on why you don't have the face-to-face interaction during the school closure. Document, document, document. It's the same advocacy skills that you have to exercise now that you had to use before. Now, I think that where schools get in trouble, and with what I think everybody can agree on, is when schools have blanket statements like everybody's going to get worksheets that are going to be uploaded and they have to turn it in 3 times a week. That is not individualized. Or no one during the school closures is going to get occupational therapy. No, that's not individualized. Those are blanket statements that are problematic. I think everybody agrees. If you look at some of the school districts, some of the law firms that represent school districts, it's pretty clear that they agree with that. I think that there's an attorney, I think in Pennsylvania, a law firm that has something very good on their website. The attorneys in Missouri have something very good on their website explaining these kinds of things to their school districts. So blanket statements are, as my daughter would say, no bueno, don't do that. It's the same kind of advocacy. You want it in the prior written notice. You want to know why they're not doing it for you.
A lot of parents are being highly encouraged by their schools to go onto these platforms and like check in, so that because they're doing attendance, and some of the districts are like actively seeking out students to go on and sign on to show that they attended school. And I've talked to parents that are going on because they're afraid. So they go on and they're doing the work, not the child. The parent is doing the work because they're afraid that there's some kind of repercussions if they don't do the work. So if a parent does go on, let's say it's a child who's not going to do that. That's the level of their disability. They're not going to go online. They're not going to sign in or check in or whatever for attendance. And the parent is going on and checking in, even if the things that are uploaded are not really appropriate to the child's education. Is the parent, just by the fact that they're going in and signing on, are they is there any way that they're saying by doing that, oh yes, we're participating, and maybe waiving their rights to compensatory education on the other side?
No, they have to document that they don't agree with the delivery of instruction. Delivery of instruction is still an analysis in the IDEA. There's been no waiver of the IDEA. There's none. So they do need to document if they do not agree with the way that the school district is delivering the services. Ask for the PWN. You may still be entitled to services, compensatory services to bring you back up to where your present level of performance was when schools, before schools closed, afterwards. I believe, and this is something that we have been advocating for through COPA, we do believe that if you decline this distance learning program and then try to come back and say, I want compensatory services for my child, but I declined them, that might be problematic for families to try to get services once schools reconvene. Now, if families are thinking that they're going to pay somebody to come into their home to provide services, like I heard on a webinar I did on Wednesday, that in some states, BCBAs are considered essential personnel. So if you have a company who may be willing to come into your home to do BCBA services, you should probably write a 10-day letter notifying the school district that what they've given you is insufficient, that you have hired somebody new to come in to assist during the closure so that there's not a terrific regression of skills, and say that in this 10-day letter, we'll be asking for reimbursement once schools reconvene, just to protect yourself. If you have a situation where everybody is comfortable with somebody coming into the home that is not part of your immediate family.
So that goes to my question regarding these, temporary distance learning plans. So if a parent, because what's happening, and I'm not sure if it's happening everywhere, but what's happening here is those are being developed by the schools and just like being
Yeah,
emailed to the parent. There's
yeah,
no parent, it's not an IEP, so there's no collaboration on there. It's
right,
this is
right.
what we're offering you. So if the parent goes, okay, well, all right, so let's get going, and they accept it, and in some districts they are having the parent sign that they received it, that they like really agree with it. I haven't seen one personally where it says I agree, but I've been told that
Mhm.
what it says. So if the parent does say, okay, I agree with this is fine for the temporary period that we are now, are they waiving their rights for compensatory education later?
No, I don't think so. Um, it's good, and families who have been doing this for a long time know that you got to put everything in writing. So if they're asking you to sign a distance learning plan, I think what I would do is say, I'm agreeing to this, but I'm not waiving my right to challenge, what was offered. I don't think it's enough, or I'm going to be asking for services after this is done. Put something like that on the form, in an email, in writing, you know, some way to say I'm not waiving. I understand also, Stacy, that in New Jersey, there are some school districts who are telling families that the only way they can get the distance learning plan is to sign a waiver. And that's problematic. Um, to ask families to sign a waiver in order to get services. And I know
That
that,
is that even legal? Can they
yeah,
do
I
that?
know that, yeah, I heard today that the Protection and Advocacy group in New Jersey is aware of it and is working on that. But we have heard stories of people being asked to sign waivers. My 2-cent analysis of that is that parents also have rights under Winkleman. And so even if they ask you to waive your child's rights, you're not necessarily waiving your rights. But maybe that's too fine a point, and probably we wouldn't want the school districts to know that there's 2 sets of rights out there. So I wouldn't sign the waiver. Now, I represent families still, in addition to my work for COPA. And so I participated in a distance learning plan meeting last week for a client who has pretty significant support needs, pretty significant. And I asked for we asked for pre-writing to also be worked on, or something like that. And they told me that if I continue to press for the pre-writing goal in the distance learning plan, that we were going to have to adjourn and reconvene an IEP team meeting. And I didn't want to hold anything up because, like I said, she's got significant support needs and is fully included in her kindergarten class, but we didn't want to hold everything up. I need to send a follow-up letter because, in addition to the pre-writing, her technology is stuck in the building. And when I pressed on the fact that the eye gaze technology is stuck in the building, I got the typical lecture of, you don't want anybody to get sick and it's a danger. And yeah, it's been a month. I don't know how long the virus lasts, but I can't imagine that no one is going into that building. So I have to continue to press on that. But like always, it is a David and Goliath, right? And so, we are always at a disadvantage. Not only now do they have the ability to control the keyboard, right, for IEP goals, now they also have control of equipment. So I made, the decision with the client to go ahead and go forward with the distance learning plan, so at least we could get it started and tackle everything else after that. But parents are at a disadvantage.
I've actually been hearing lots of stories where kids that are home are making more progress
Yes,
than
I've
they
heard
ever
that too.
have, which I just like, I kind of love that. Um, but so those families who, because I know personally, I know quite a few of them who are thinking, I'm not sending my kid back to school. They've made more progress in the last couple of weeks than they did in the last 2 years.
Mhm.
But do I really want to do that? And so they're looking at other things that they might be able to do other than sending them back into a school building. So if a parent decides to do that for next year, so they haven't made the decision yet, let's say that it's July and they decide, yeah, we're not going to go back there. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing now. Do they have any rights to compensatory education at that time for all this time that's missed this school year?
If they've made progress behaviorally, because I have heard same anecdotes that a child who was unable to function in a building because of continuing behavior challenges in a building and is now at home and is now able to attend and access curriculum. Um, so you could say that you've made progress on the behavior side. Um, you would have to look at whether or not that progress was so significant, just general academics included, um, but that you're still entitled to what those minutes might be. Compensatory education is really an equitable remedy that's been fashioned by courts that is designed to put a child where they would have been but for the failure to provide a free appropriate public education, but for the failure to provide an OT or speech or physical therapist, because in normal times, um, sometimes when somebody goes on maternity leave, principals send out emails and say, nobody's going to be getting speech and language because speech and language pathologist is on maternity leave. Um, so that would be an instance where you would get compensatory education, because it is an equitable remedy. It's designed to place you where you would have been but for the failure to provide the services. So that is would be a heavily fact-based determination, if there has been progress, whether you are entitled to that compensatory education in the same manner that it's defined by the courts, because it's not in the law, it's an equitable remedy.
Well, and that goes to the same thing with the other question is if the child has made more progress, and I see it not only behavioral, I guess maybe it is the behavioral, they're just calmer. They're more
Yeah,
ready to learn. Let's put it that
yeah,
way. They're more
yeah,
ready to learn. They're calmer. The anxiety of getting up in the morning, getting on the bus, getting off to school to a place that's very overstimulating, and I don't want to be here. So maybe all of that is off. So now the child could just be and is ready to learn, because these kids, like I see them, parents are sending me videos of them reading and writing and much more engaged than when I sit at the IEP meetings and they tell me, oh, he doesn't work, he won't work, he's running around the room, whatever the case may be. So the families who are seeing that the data, so let's say that they did have the data, they
mhm,
pulled their progress reports, they
mhm,
see that their
mhm,
child wasn't making progress, and in say the last 9 weeks of the school year made significant progress,
mhm.
would the parent have any rights to I guess, to be able to file due process to get to, I guess, to get the school to change? Because clearly what was happening before, if the child wasn't making any progress,
Right,
something was broken. So does a parent have any rights to be able to pursue a change from what was? Because going back into something that wasn't working isn't
right,
very attractive to a lot of people.
right, right. Sure. I mean, I think you need to have your documentation that there has been significant progress um, during the time of the school closure. Whether or not you have a case to continue the distance learning, um, I'm not certain that under an least restrictive environment analysis, um, that would be appropriate, because it would be the most restrictive placement at home with no access to peers. Um, but if it's working now and it wasn't working pre-closure, then yes, that it does show that something was broken before school ended, or before school closed. And so, like anything else, it is all about the documentation and the data, to try to prove your case that it was inappropriate pre-COVID closure. Lots of progress with this individualized attention and no distractions. And now I need X placement that will offer what this was offering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question from the group, and she says, so is having an RBT, registered behavior technician, that comes into the home during distance learning affect the compensatory services later? She says the RBT is working on ABA services while assisting with schoolwork.
Yeah. Well, you would have to see what the data looks like, I think. If part of the behavior analyst's job is to facilitate social interactions or assist with transitions or assist with unstructured activities or large group activities, you're not going to be able to replicate that in a home distance learning model. So that skill deficit may still be there when school reopens, in which case that may go to a claim for those services that you were unable to access and work on because of the COVID closure.
From what I understand, the Council of Administrators of Special Education and the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, those were the two entities, and there may be more, that were looking for waivers.
Mhm.
And Ms. DeVos had, I think it was 30 days in order to come up with some type of plan of what was going to happen with that.
Right.
Are we at our 30 days now? And if we are, because I haven't seen her make any kind of public comment as far as to waive or to not to waive. So do you have any like up-to-date information on where we are with the potential of any waivers?
Yeah. So in times of natural disasters, superintendents have written in to the department and said, we had Hurricane Sandy. Do we still have to provide, evaluations, initial evaluations? And the department's position the entire time, and again, on March 21st, 2020, said timelines still remain because the Department of Education does not have the ability to waive timelines. Her 30-day report is due, we think, at the end of this month, at the end of April. Will be 30 days. Many school groups are advocating for waivers. It's our position, COPA's position, that the IDEA has a tremendous amount of flexibility already in it. There's flexibility to waive the 45 days for due process decisions. Parents and schools waive that all the time. There's the ability to waive the presence of a parent at a meeting. You can call in to a meeting. You can video conference into a meeting since 2004. There's flexibility in the law, and families and schools work together all the time to figure these things out. I mean, when you look at how many due process hearings are held around the country every year, it really is a very small percentage compared to how many children receive special education services in the United States and in the territories. So we are anticipating that there might be a request for waivers. We did an action alert on Tuesday. If you go to our webpage and look at that, I know that Advocates for Children out of New York also sent out an alert. And that action alert is supposed to go to your representatives, your senators, your congressmen. That's about all that I've got right now. We do have a call later on this morning with our policy person to talk about where we are. But right now, what people can do is reach out to your senators, reach out to your Congress people to tell them that you don't want any waivers. The IDEA and disability has always been a bipartisan issue. because everybody is touched at some point or another by disability. You know, you look at Senator Cassidy from Louisiana. You know, you look at Senator Murray. So everybody has, you know, is touched by disability. So reach out to your Congress people to tell them no waivers.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know the Autism Society, our national organization, I'm on the public policy committee, and we've been talking about this so much over the last couple of weeks, and really doing all that we can with writing letters and, you know, legislatively advocating. So I want to thank you very much for your time
Thank you.
and just your willingness to share our community with so much information. And so it's just so desperately needed right now, because everybody's confused. The schools are confused, the parents are confused, and you know, a lot of schools and school systems are telling families, we're just trying to figure it out too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we recognize that, but we also want to make sure that parents understand that they do have rights, that just because their children are home doesn't mean that,
Yes.
okay, it's a free for all, and
That's
I guess
right.
I just got to figure this out on my own.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So thank you so much for all
Yes,
that you
thank you.
do. And COPA is such an amazing organization. And so
It
for
is.
all you guys out there, please check out COPA. I am going to put, because this video will go on YouTube, it will go on our Facebook channel, and I will put the link there for
Okay.
COPA. So please go onto the website, check it out. When you hear about the conferences, they have amazing conferences and lots of great webinars and things that you can check out. So please do so. It's amazing, and it really gives you guys cutting edge and up-to-date information. And unfortunately, when you have a child with a disability who's within a public school system, whether it's charter or your district or municipal school system, you have to understand your rights. It's just kind of the way that it is. I'm sorry. Just
Me
it
too.
is what you do.
I know.
So
too.
thank you so much for coming
Of course.
on and speaking to me, and thank you guys for listening and watching, and keep an eye out for us next time.
All
Have
right.
a good
Thank
one,
you.
everybody.
Everybody stay safe. Bye-bye.